We are on DAF Tes Samad Aleph, I think it's the 8th line, Acherim Omrim. I want to review what we saw in the Mishnah yesterday. This is very important, not difficult, just somewhat intricate and technical. Okay, the Mishnah had told us that there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rabbi Akiva regarding what? Regarding a king. The word nasi, anytime we see it in Horayos, means a king, as we'll see very clearly later on. A king, according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, never brings a korban olav yored, a korban of fluctuating value. There are 3 mitzvahs in the Torah that are grouped together for which the Torah says, for an unintentional commission of that sin, you bring a korban olav yored. The 3 are shmias kol. If a person is called to testify for his friend in court and he lies under oath saying he doesn't know any information and then later confesses, a person brings a korban olav yored. If a person makes a shvuas bitoy, which means a false oath not related to court cases, just saying something either nonsensical or untrue under oath, he has to bring a korban olav yored. And the 3rd type of korban olav yored is tumas mikdash v'kadashav, defiling the temple or its holy things while in a state of tumah. In all of those 3 cases, if they are done, a person, in order to atone for those sins, brings a korban olav yored. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says that a king is never subject to bring those. Rabbi Akiva disagrees, and he says a king is subject to a korban olav yored. However, only 2 out of those 3. 1 out of the 3 for sure he is not subject to bring, and that is shmias kol, if he is called to testify and he swears falsely. Why? Because a king can never be forced to testify in a court of law. He has immunity from testimony. So, the Gemara yesterday had said that what is Rabbi Yossi Haglili's reason for saying that a king never brings a korban olav yored? Because the whole premise of a korban olav yored is that if you can't afford the animal korban, we let you bring a bird. If you can't afford the bird, we let you bring flour. A king never has to worry about affordability because he's always in the highest economic status. Now, in the course of explaining the law of a king, the brisa that we saw yesterday also included the Kohen Gadol. Our Mishnah did not address a Kohen Gadol, but the brisa that we saw yesterday did, and it said that not only is a king not subject to a korban olav yored, but a Kohen Gadol also is not subject to a korban olav yored for the very same reason, that a Kohen Gadol always has assets. And this is where we get to just the last line of the brisa that we neglected to finish yesterday. Acherim omrim, other rabbis say, minayin shim ein lo gadlehu mishel echav. How do we know that if a Kohen is lacking in assets, that we basically assess his fellow Kohanim to make him financially whole? Tamulomar v'hakohen hagadol mei echav asher yutzak al rosho. Gadlehu mei echav. It says the Kohen who shall be greater than his brothers, could also be translated the Kohen who shall be greater from his brothers, which means that he can be enriched by the other Kohanim in order for him to be of financial means. Now, Ba'amine Ravina me Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Nasi shenitztara mahu, midchadachi o miftar pater. The next question that the Gemara entertains incidentally is what would happen if a king acquires tsaras, and therefore he is no longer able to function as a king. And then he sins and has to bring a korban olav yored. Do we say that because he still is intrinsically a king, he therefore is exempt from a korban olav yored according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili? Or would we say that since functionally he cannot function as a king, he has to bring a korban olav yored? So Amar lei dilach o de Gaza. So the response to him was, where do you suggest the king get the assets to pay for this korban? from your bank account or from the king's treasury? And the answer is obvious. He was asking a rhetorical question. He's getting it from the king's treasury. And since he's getting the assets from the treasury, and therefore the reason for bringing a korban olav does not apply, because affordability is never an issue for a king who has constant access to his treasury, therefore, even though he cannot function as a king, he will still be exempt from bringing a korban olav. Now let's take a look at the next brisa, which is also an important supplement to what we saw yesterday. Tanya, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Mashiach Potter Mikulan. Rabbi Akiva says that a Kohen Gadol is potter from a korban olav. Now, let's be clear. According to Rabbi Yossi, and this is the vital part that you need to get straight in your heads. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says that both for a king and a Kohen Gadol, they never bring a korban olav. Rabbi Akiva disagrees, and he says that a king does bring a korban olav, except for the special case of shmias kol. But Rabbi Akiva, according to this brisa now, agrees with Rabbi Yossi Haglili regarding the Kohen Gadol. And he holds that a Kohen Gadol never brings a korban olav. A king does, but a Kohen Gadol does not. So Amar Rava, my time of the Rabbi Akiva, Amar Kra, Ze Korban Aharon Uvanav, Zu Ba'achovalo, Ve'en Acheres Ba'achovalo. So the answer is because the Torah talks about a special flour offering that the Kohen Gadol has to bring on a daily basis. 1/10 of an ephah of flour he has to offer, half in the morning and half in the afternoon. And what we learn from the verbiage of that pasuk is that that is the only flour offering that a Kohen Gadol ever has to bring. And what that teaches me is that since a korban olav, if a person is poor, can be brought from flour, it cannot be something that the Kohen Gadol would ever have to bring, because the Torah says the only flour offering he brings is his own personal asirisa ephah, 1/10 of an ephah. Ve'ema ki memayit le'rachmana midali dalos umayniu asirisa ephah, aval anios va'ashiros lo mi'ate rachmana. But the Gemara says, but I don't understand your argument. Maybe all the Torah is saying is that if the Kohen Gadol is poor, then he cannot bring a flour offering for the korban olav, but he is still subject to bringing a korban olav either as an animal or as a bird. All the Torah is excluding him from is bringing a korban olav from flour. But where do you see from there that he doesn't bring the korban olav at all? The Gemara answers, Lo sal kadaitach dichsiv v'chiper alav hakohen al chataso asher chata me'achas me'ela. And so what we learn from the verbiage there is hamiskaper ba'achas miskaper bekulan, v'she'ein miskaper be'achas ein miskaper bekulan. So the answer is because the Torah says regarding the korban olav that the person shall receive atonement from one of these three types of korban olav, either an animal, a bird, or flour. And the fact that the Torah says me'achas me'ila from one of them, it's like I said yesterday, one for all and all for one. Which means is that if you can bring any one of the three, then you are obligated to bring one of the three. But if I am precluded from bringing even one of the three, then I am completely exempt from the korban in its entirety. That's what I learned from the verbiage in that pasuk. And therefore, if you're going to preclude the Kohen Gadol from bringing the flour, then he is also precluded from bringing the bird or the animal. Ela me'ata dichsiv v'hayachi yesham la'achas me'ela, hachanami d'chol ha'mischayev be'echas mischayev bekulan, v'she'ein mischayev be'echas ein mischayev bekulan. Alama t'nan Rabbi Akiva Omer nasi chayev chutz mishmias kol. So the Gemara says, well, using that argument, because the Torah said the words me'achas me'ela, from one of these, so it's all for one and one for all. So then what about the same type of verbiage that is used to describe the three types of sins for which you bring a korban olav? Remember, what were those three types of sins? Either shmias kol, shvuas bitoy, or tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Shmias kol is when I am called to testify. In the court. Shvuas bitoy is taking a false oath on some non-court matter. And Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav is entering the temple in a state of impurity. those are the three that the Torah says the penalty is a korban ola v'yored. It uses the language of achas there also. So you should make an argument that if a person cannot bring a korban for one of those cases, he should be exempt from bringing a korban in all of those cases. And yet that's not Rabbi Akiva's shita. Rabbi Akiva says a king is only exempt from a korban ola v'yored for shmias kol, but not for the other two. So be consistent, Rabbi Akiva. If you're telling me that the word achas, written by the three types of economic status, economic types of korban, bird, animal, and flower, and if you're exempt from one, you're exempt from all, say the same thing by the three types of sins. If you're exempt from one, you're exempt from all. So Abaya v'Rava d'Amri to Ravayo me'achas mashmalei la'achas lo mashmalei. O ma'ishna me'achas de mashmalei, de kasve rachmana lebasof gabe asirat sa'efa. So the answer is, both according to Abai and Rava, is that the word achas that's written in the context of the three types of korban ola v'yored, the animal, the bird, and the flower, that Rabbi Akiva holds of, that if I'm exempt from the flower, I'm exempt from the korban entirely. But the achas that is written in the context of the three types of sins, Rabbi Akiva does not hold it's all for one and one for all. Why is that? Because the word achas, when it's written in the context of the three levels of korban, is written adjacent to the lowest level of korban, which is the flower. And that's our cue that when the Torah says the word achas, it is specifically addressing the Kohen Gadol. You, Kohen Gadol, cannot bring the flower, and since you cannot bring the flower, you cannot bring the other two. And that's why the Torah put the word achas adjacent to the case of the flower to tell us specifically this law. But the word achas that's written in the context of the three types of sins is not written adjacent to the law of shmias kol, of being brought to testify. And therefore it's not specifically meant to exclude the king from the other two types of sins for which there's a korban ola v'yored. So the Gemara now says, Lememra, d'chol mechayev ba'asiris ha'ifa, mechayev bekulan. D'isal kadaitach mischayev be'echas, afal pi she'en mischayev bekulan, nichtevei lahai me'achas me'ela bedalos inami ba'ashiros. And this is just the continuation of the reasoning, is that if the word achas was not meant to exclude the Kohen Gadol from the korban ola v'yored in its entirety, why was the word achas specifically chosen to be written adjacent to the flower? Let it be written adjacent to the animal or the bird offering. The fact that the Torah, Hashem, chose to put it adjacent to the flower means that Hashem was talking specifically about the Kohen Gadol to say that he's totally exempt from a korban ola v'yored because he already has an outstanding obligation only to bring his own flower offering. Okay, that's the conclusion. Let's just recap so we know where we are. According to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, a king is always exempt from a korban ola v'yored. A Kohen Gadol is always exempt from a korban ola v'yored. According to Rabbi Akiva, a king is chayiv to bring a korban ola v'yored, except in the case of shmias kol. But he agrees with Rabbi Yossi Haglili that a Kohen Gadol is always exempt from bringing a korban ola v'yored. We now go to the Mishnah. We're going to see a third opinion. Kol hamitzvot shebetorah shechayovin al zidon an kores v'al shegegos and chatos hayachid mevi kisba u'seira v'hanasi sa'ir u'mashiach u'beistin mevi'in par. So any kind of violation that an individual commits for which the intentional commission is kares, so a person would bring, for an unintentional act, he would bring a korban chatas. And that korban chatas shall be comprised of either a sheep, or a she-goat. Either one is acceptable. That's what a standard korban chatas animal is. What does a king bring when he sins? He brings a he-goat. What does a Kohen Gadol and a Beis Din bring when a Kohen Gadol himself sins, or when the Beis Din instructs a community to sin? They bring a bull. So a commoner brings a she animal, either a sheep or a goat. A king brings a he-goat, and the Kohen Gadol and the Beis Din bring a bull. Uva avodas kochavim hayachid v'hanasi v'hamoshiach mevi'en seira based in par v'soyer, par la'ola v'soyer l'chatas. But when it comes to this unintentional sin of idolatry, then the individual commoner and the Kohen Gadol and the king are all the same. They have to bring a she-goat. There's no differentiation. And it's only the Beis Din that has a special status. They bring a bull for a burnt offering and a he-goat for a sin offering. Now, Asham Talui, if a person is in doubt whether he committed a sin or not, so Hayachid v'hanasi chayavin u'mashiach hu Beis Din peturim. So here too the Mishnah distinguishes between a king and a Kohen Gadol. It says that a commoner and a king do bring an Asham Talui korban, but a Kohen Gadol and a Beis Din never bring an Asham Talui. Now, Asham Vadai, for a definite sin, for which the penalty is not a chatas, but rather an Asham offering, and there are specific kinds of averos for which you bring an Asham. We don't have to go through those examples right now, but the Torah certainly prescribes an Asham for certain kinds of sins. Hayachid v'hanasi v'hamoshiach chayavin u'beis din peturin. So then, all three types of individuals, whether it's a commoner, a king, or a Kohen Gadol, are obligated to bring the korban asham, standard, but the Beis Din never brings a korban asham. If they instruct people to violate a mitzvah, which the penalty is a korban asham. Al shmias hakol ve'al bitois fasayim ve'al tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Now these are the three examples that the Torah gives for bringing a korban olav yored, a korban of fluctuating value. Again, shmias kol, being brought to testify. Bitois fasayim, taking a false oath. And tumas mikdash v'kadashav is defiling the temple or temple property. So Beis Din peturin v'hayachid v'anasi v'hamashiach chayavin. So the Beis Din, if they make the erroneous instruction to the community, never bring a korban olav yored, but an individual, a king, and a Kohen Gadol do bring a korban olav yored. So this is clearly a different opinion from what we've seen before. So, Ella she'ein Kohen Gadol Moshiach chayv al tumas mikdash v'kadashav divrei Reb Shimon. However, says Reb Shimon, a Kohen Gadol never brings a korban olav yored for defiling the temple. So, we have now a third opinion. Let us review. Please get this straight in your head if you can. I'm just asking if you can try just to classify it in your head. We have three opinions: Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yossi Haglili says that a king is always patur from bringing a korban olav yored, and so too the same halach is by a Kohen Gadol. So Rabbi Yossi Haglili says you're always patur if you're a king or a Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Akiva is the middle opinion, and he says that a king is obligated except for shmias kol, but a Kohen Gadol is always patur. And now we have the third opinion, which is Rabbi Shimon, and he says both a king and a Kohen Gadol do have to bring a korban olav yored, but he agrees with Rabbi Akiva that a king is patur for shmias kol, and he also tells us something else that's interesting, that a Kohen Gadol is patur for one case, which is tumas mikdash v'kadashav. Now, why is a Kohen Gadol patur? So we don't have a reason yet. The Gemara will explain it, but ostensibly it would be because it's his turf, it's his home base, and therefore he's not held as responsible for making it tameh. So umahein meviin. So now the question is, when a king or a Kohen Gadol has to bring a korban olav yored, what do they have to bring? In other words, the assumption is that they're not going to bring a bird or flower or the standard animal for a korban olav yored because of their special status. They're going to bring a special animal. So korban olav yored, what do they bring as a korban olav yored? So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Hanasi Mevi Sa'ir, and he says that the king has to bring a goat. Now, strangely enough, he doesn't talk about what a Kohen Gadol has to bring. And why is that? So the Gemara is going to have to explain that. But at least Rabbi Eliezer basically just said, now that you've told me, Reb Shimon, that both a Kohen Gadol and a king have to bring a korban olav yored, let me just point out that when the king has to bring a korban olav yored, he brings a goat. He does not bring the standard animal that is prescribed normally for a korban olav yored. So the Gemara now says, Tanya, Reb Shimon hayanosin klal, kol shehayachid ba'asham talui, hanasi kayotze bo, Mashiach ubeistin peturin. So the Brisa just elaborates on our mission, and it says that according to Reb Shimon, the rule is as follows. When it comes to the law of Asham Talui, a king and a commoner are the same, that they're both chayiv. But a Kohen Gadol and the Beis Din are pater. V'chol shehu ba'asham vadai, nasi u'mashiach kayotze bahen, u'beis din peturim. When it comes for a sin where the Torah's penalty is to bring an asham, not because it's a doubt, but rather because that's the penalty assessed by the Torah, a korban asham. So all individuals, whether it's a commoner, a king, or a Kohen Gadol, are the same, they're obligated, and only the Beis Din is pater. Shemias hakol ubitois fasayim tumas mikdash v'kadashav, Beis Din peturin, nasi u'mashiach chayavin. He says, but when it comes to a korban olav yored for the three sins of Shemias kol, bitois fasayim, and tumas mikdash v'kadashav, so then a kohen and a king are obligated just like a commoner, but the only and only Beis Din is pater. Ella she'ein hanasi chayv b'shmias hakol v'lo mashiach b'tumas mikdash v'kadashav. However, a king will be exempt for a korban olav yored for shmias kol because he cannot be forced to testify, and a Kohen Gadol will be pater from a korban olav yored for tumas mikdash v'kadashav because it's his home turf. Kol shehu ba'olav yored nasi kayotze bo. That and then the last line of the Brisa seems to be contradictory because it says that any time that there's a korban olav yored, a king has to bring one, but a Mashiach u'beis din peturin. But a Kohen Gadol and Beis Din are pater from a korban olav yored. So the Gemara now says, Ha gufa kasha. You've just contradicted yourself in this Brisa, Reb Shimon. Amart she'ein Mashiach chay b'tumas mikdash v'kadasha. B'tumas mikdash v'kadasha v'da pater v'al b'shmias hakol v'tus v'asayim chayev. Eima seifa. Kol shehu ba'olav yored nasi kayotze ba Mashiach u'beis din peturin. Ketani Mashiach u'beis din peturin. Ma beis din peturin mikulan af Mashiach pater mikulan. Kashana hadadi. So the Gemara says, look at this. You've just contradicted yourself. In one breath, in the first part of the Brisa, you said that a Kohen Gadol is only pater for Tumas Mikdash v'Kadasha, but for the other types of sins that you bring a korban olav yored for, he is liable for Shmias Kol and Bitois Fasayim. And then in the last line you said that a Kohen Gadol is the same as a Beis Din, and that he's pater completely from a korban olav yored in all cases. So which one is it? So Amar Rav Huna Bereita Rav Yehoshua Lo Kasha Kan Bidalus Kan Bidale Dalus. Reb Shimon Savar La Kerebi Akiva Bechada Upolagale Bechada. Savar La Kerebi Akiva Bidale Dalus the Pater Upolagale Bidalus. So the Gemara answers that Reb Shimon really holds that a Kohen Gadol does have to bring a korban olav yored, with the exception of the case of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav. But what does he mean in the last line that a Kohen Gadol is totally pater? He's totally pater if he's poor and all he can afford is a flour offering. We do not give him the option of bringing a flour offering. That's what we say, that he doesn't bring a korban olav yored. It means that he doesn't bring the flour offering. Why? Because he holds like Rabbi Akiva had said in the previous Brisa, where Rabbi Akiva had quoted the pasuk by the Kohen Gadol's personal flour offering that says that that's the only flour he ever has to bring, to the exclusion of a korban olav yored flour offering. The only thing that he argues with Rabbi Akiva is that Rabbi Akiva had said in that case it's one for all and all for one. That if I'm pater for bringing a flour offering, then I'm pater completely from bringing a korban olav yored. But Reb Shimon holds that no, just because you cannot bring a flour offering does not preclude you from bringing the other two types of korban olav yored, either a bird or an animal. So that's what Reb Shimon means. In the first part of the Brisa, he's saying that a Kohen Gadol is subject to bringing a korban olav yored, provided that it's either an animal or a bird. But the last line of the Brisa that says a Kohen Gadol is always pater from bringing a korban olav yored, meaning that he can never bring a flour offering. That's the way you reconcile the Brisa. Ela she'ein Kohen Gadol chayev v'chulei. So then what did we say? We said that a Kohen Gadol is, according to Reb Shimon, never brings a korban olav yored for Tumas Mikdash v'Kadasha for defiling the temple. Amar Chizkiya, my time of the Reb Shimon. What's his reasoning? The Torah says that if a person enters the temple, he shall be cut off from the congregation. So clearly there's some kind of connection to the congregation that the Torah is making about this person. Misha karbano shava l'kahol, yatzazeh she'en karbano shava l'kahol. So since a Kohen Gadol's korban is unique and it's not equivalent to the rest of the congregation, therefore he is excluded from the law of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav. Not because it's his home turf like we said before, but rather based on a special Gzeras HaKasav, that if your korban is not the same as the congregation's, then you are off the hook. But wait a minute. Im kein nasi nami, ein karbano shava l'kahal. But 1 second. A nasi's korban is also not the same as a kahal's korban. And if that's the case, then why don't we say that a nasi is also off the hook for Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav? The Gemara answers, Shava b'chapara d'yom ha'kippurim. But a nasi shares with the kahal in the goat offering on Yom Kippur. In other words, what we meant to say is that a Kohen Gadol is different from a kahal in that on Yom Kippur, his atoning animal is a bull. If you remember from the Musaf of Yom Kippur, his atoning animal is a bull, and the rest of the community atones with a goat. But a king is part of the communal goat, and therefore his korban is the same. But wait a minute. Im kein kohanim nami lo shavu l'kahol b'kapora d'yom ha'kippurim. Well, if that's the case, then why don't we exclude any kohen from the law of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav by that same argument? Because as we know from the Musaf liturgy, the regular kohanim atone their sins through the same bull that the Kohen Gadol atones his sins. And if you're telling me that that's the criterion, then all kohanim should be exempt from a korban when they defile the temple. The Gemara answers, Kohanim shavu l'kahol b'sha'ar mitzvos d'shana kula. So the answer is because Kohanim, when they commit a sin, they are no different from the rest of the kahal. If, let's say, the kahal commits a sin, and they have to bring a sin offering to atone for their sin, Kohanim would join together with them. So the Gemara says, Im kein Mashiach nami hashava b'sha'ar mitzvos d'shana. Well, that's the same thing as a Kohen Gadol, so why should he be excluded? So Ela Amarava Ema Hachi, Misha Chataso Shava Liyechidim Umay Nihu Kahal. So the final answer that the Gemara gives is as follows. It's got nothing to do with Yom Kippur. The way that we understand it is as follows. A Kohen Gadol's korban for committing as a sin as an individual is a par to atone for his sins. The animal that an individual brings as part of a community, whether, because he's part of the Jewish community, but if he commits an individual sin, he has to bring a goat. And so, therefore, what the Torah is essentially saying is that if your animal is different, because the Kohen Gadol brings a bull and everyone else brings a goat, so therefore he's excluded from the law of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav. However, if your animal is the same, so then you're included in the mitzvah of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav. And that's why Kohanim are included, and that's why a Nasi is included, because apparently, according to this Gemara, even though a Nasi brings a he-goat and the rest of the Kahal brings a she-goat, but it's the same animal, so I guess the same species of animal, and that would be the difference. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Hanasi Mevi Sa'ir v'chulei. Now, Rabbi Eliezer had asked the question, when we say that a Kohen Gadol and a king have to bring a korban for Tumas Mikdash, for korban olav yored, according to Reb Shimon, what kind of animal do they bring? It's got to be a unique animal. So Rabbi Eliezer says, for a king, the animal is going to be a he-goat. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan lo Amar Rabbi Eliezer ele betumas mikdash v'kadashav hol v'nemar kares bo kiva kivua. So Rabbi Yochanan wants to clarify, for all other karbanos of olav yored, a kohen and a king are the same as everyone else. If they commit a sin, they have to bring a regular korban olav yored just like anybody else. What was Rabbi Eliezer addressing? He was addressing the special case of a king who enters into the temple. In that situation, Says Rabbi Eliezer, there's a special carbon he has to bring. He has to bring a he-goat, just like for any sin for which the penalty is kares. Why? Because when you look at the three mitzvos that the Torah says you have to bring a carbon olav yored for, only one out of those three, when it is done intentionally, has a penalty of kares. And that is tumas mikdash v'kadashav. The other two, taking a false oath or being brought to testify and swearing falsely, if you do it intentionally, you do not get kares for that. It's only a mitzvah lo saseh. And therefore, there is no special status of your animal when you want to atone. But for a sin for which it's zedono kares, that doing it intentionally gives you kares, there Rabbi Eliezer believes that the nasi, the king, has to bring a special animal that he would normally bring, just like for any sin where zedono is kares, he brings a he-goat. So Amar Rav Papa hachanami mistavra d'isal gadaitach Rabbi Eliezer al kulam ka'amar mechti sa'ir nasi upar mashiach b'makom yachid lachatas koi nisnei nami mashiach mevi par b'shmias kolovitus fasayim ela midalo ketani mashiach shmami na'atumas mikdash v'kadosh of koi de mashiach pater. So Rav Papa says we can infer this from Rabbi Eliezer's statement itself. Rabbi Eliezer chose to only discuss what a king has to bring in lieu of a regular korban olav yored. Why didn't he discuss the Kohen Gadol? That was the question that I presented to you when we learned the Mishnah just a moment ago. Why does Rabbi Eliezer only say the special korban that a king has to bring and not that a Kohen Gadol has to bring if Reb Shimon was talking about both a king and a Kohen Gadol? The answer is because he's only addressing the violation of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav that a Kohen Gadol is pater for, and only a king is liable for. And that's the reason why he only chose the example of a king. So that proves that he only holds that there's a special korban for one out of those three, because it's Zedono Kares. It's unique from those other two because it's the only one that, if you do it intentionally, you get Kares. Armale Rav Huna Berei de Rav Nasan Rav Papa Mimai Dilma Rabbi Eliezer Akul Honkoi Uva Mashiach Savarla Karebi Akiva Do Amar Mashiach Pater Bekulan. But wait a minute. Maybe that's not the way. Maybe you're misreading Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe the reason why Rabbi Eliezer only addresses the case of the king and not the Kohen Gadol is because he disagrees with Reb Shimon and he holds like Rabbi Akiva, who says that a Kohen Gadol never has to bring a korban olav yored, and therefore Rabbi Eliezer was only addressing the case of a king. So, but really in reality, I'll argue that for all three, a king has to bring a special korban olav yored, or at least two out of the three, which would be Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav and Shavuos Bitur. Amar lei v'Rebbe Akiva mi pater lei mi par v'sulo midi. So he said back to him, so Rav Papa said back to him, that's not a question. He says, you're right, Rebbe Akiva says that a Kohen Gadol is pater from a korban olav yored. But how do you know that he says that a Kohen Gadol doesn't bring anything? Maybe Rabbi Akiva holds, like Rabbi Eliezer, that a Kohen Gadol, when he commits a sin for which the normal penalty is a korban olav yored, he has to bring his special animal. So therefore, that would not, if Rabbi Eliezer held that, like Rabbi Akiva, he would also have addressed the Kohen Gadol, what special animal does he bring? Because maybe that's what Rabbi Akiva holds as well. But the fact of the matter is that Rabbi Eliezer only chooses to talk about a king, and that proves he was only talking about the mitzvah of Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav that's violated, and not the other two. The Sulamidi says, and there's nothing more to discuss. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Moda Rabbi Eliezer she'ein mevi asham. So now Rabbi Yochanan also says that according to Rabbi Eliezer, even though Rabbi Eliezer says that a king has to bring the normal offering that he would normally bring for any sin that's Zedono Kares, for Tumas Mikdash v'Kadashav, he has to bring the same animal. But if he is in doubt whether he entered the temple and defiled it, he does not bring an Asham Talui. See, normally, a king would have to bring an Asham Talui, like we learned in our Mishnah. But for this, even though it's the same korban as a korban chatos that he would normally have to bring, and if he's in doubt, he would have to bring an Asham Talui for a korban chatos. For this, because it's a special case that is in lieu of a korban olav yored, if he's in doubt whether he defiled the temple, he would not bring an asham talui. Tani Tana Kameder of Sheshes, Asham Toli Baal Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav. Now there was a brisa that was once taught in the presence of Rav Sheshes by a student who was reciting the brisa. And he said that a king does bring an Asham Toli for Tumas Mikdash V'Kadashav if he's in doubt. So Amar Lei, the Amar Lachmani, Rabbi Eliezer, the Amar Hol, V'Nemar Bokaris Kiva Kivua, Maisi Nasi, So'ir Aleh. So Rav Sheshes challenged this person reciting the brisa. Who does this brisa go like? It goes like Rabbi Eliezer, who says that since he brings the same kind of animal that he would have to bring for a korban chatos, if he's in doubt, he brings an Asham Talui. So V'hamar Rabbi Yochanan Moda Rabbi Eliezer, Shein Mevi Asham Talui. Kasha. But Rabbi Yochanan said explicitly that that's not the halacha. That even though the animal that he's bringing is the same animals that he would bring for a korban chatos, since it's in lieu of not a korban chatos, but rather of a korban olav yored, he does not bring an Asham Toli when he is in doubt. So that's the kasha on that student's quotation of the brisa. Hadron Alachora Kohen Moshiach. We're just going to go now through this very quick Mishnah and Gemara. If you haven't been following and you're totally spaced out, I wouldn't blame you for closing your Gemara and leaving, because I noticed that many of you are spaced out. So I don't hold it against you because it's very complicated. But this next piece is digestible unto itself. So you may want to say, you know what, I didn't get anything out of the last 20 minutes. Let me get something out of the next 5 minutes. Okay? That at least it's not a total waste of time, right? So put away your devices and let's just learn for 5 minutes and get something good. Okay? Kohen Mashiach Shechata, v'achar kach over mimishichuso, v'chein nasi shechata, v'achar kach over migdulaso, Kohen Mashiach mevi par, v'hanasi mevi sa'ir. So, the Mishnah addresses in this new parak the following case. Kohen Gadol sins while he's a Kohen Gadol, and then gets demoted. A king sins while he's a king, and then gets demoted, gets dethroned. Okay? So what korban do they bring for the sin that they committed while they were in their special status? So the Mishnah says that the Kohen Gadol brings the special status bull, even though now he's no longer a Kohen Gadol, and the king brings the he-goat, even though he's no longer a king. However, Mashiach she'avar mimishichuso v'achar kachata, v'chein hanasi she'avar migdulaso v'achar kachata, Kohen Mashiach mevi par, v'hanasi keheja. But here's where there's a difference between the Kohen Gadol and the king. Let's say a Kohen Gadol gets demoted and then commits a sin, and a king gets dethroned and then commits the sin. So this is where there's a difference. The Kohen Gadol is treated still as a Kohen Gadol and brings a bull, but the king brings a chatas like a commoner. The Gemara now says, just a simple stylistic question first. Hashto yeshlomar over mimishichuso v'achar kach chata mevi par chata v'achar kach over mimishichuso tzricha lemeimar. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. The Seifa tells me that in the case of the Kohen Gadol, even if after he was demoted he committed the sin, he brings the korban of a Kohen Gadol, then surely if he sinned while he was a Kohen Gadol and then got demoted, surely he would have to bring the korban of a Kohen Gadol. So why was it necessary to say that in the Reisha? The Gemara answers, Mishum dekatani gabe nasi dichi over minisiuso v'achar kachata kehejot maisi, ahachitani gabe Mashiach chata v'achar kach over mevi par. So the Gemara says it's very simple. We needed the first part of the Mishnah for the sake of the king, not for the sake of the Kohen Gadol. You needed to tell me that in a case of where a king sins and then gets demoted, he has to bring the korban of a king. You might have thought that once he's demoted, let him bring the korban of a commoner. No, there's a difference. If the king sins while he's still a king and then gets demoted, he brings the korban of a king. If he gets demoted and then sins, he brings the korban of a commoner. So that distinction was necessary to make. And since you needed to make that distinction by the king, you wrote the parallel case by the case of the Kohen Gadol as well. So now the Gemara says, if you need to go, Alex, I understand. Mina hani mili. So the Gemara says, where do we get this from? Where do we get this idea that for a Kohen Gadol, it makes no difference whether he sins while he's a Kohen Gadol or after he's a Kohen Gadol? So the Tanu Rabbanan, V'hikriv al chataso, melamed shemevi chataso misha avar. Because the Brisa says, look at the language of the pasuk. V'hikriv al chataso. That a Kohen Gadol unconditionally, regardless of what his current status is, shall bring a korban for his sin as a Kohen Gadol. That's the way the Gemara reads the pasuk. Sheyachol v'halodinu. Umanas yishmevi b'shigigas ma'isa in mevi chatasu misha avar. Mashiach shemevi b'shigigas ma'isa el al helam davrim shigigas ma'isa lo kol sheken. Talmud lomar v'hikriv al chatasu malamed shemevi al chatasu misha avar. The Gemara makes the following kal v'chomer. You might have thought that you could make a kal v'chomer as follows. What's the kal v'chomer? When we compare a king to a Kohen Gadol, we discover that the scope of violations for which a king brings his special korban is a wider scope of items than for a Kohen Gadol. What do I mean by that? When does a king bring a special he-goat? A king brings a special he-goat for two types of shogeg. One, when he thinks I'll use the example of chaylev because it's very simple. One, when he thinks it's okay to eat chaylev, because he thinks erroneously the halacha is you're allowed to eat chaylev. And the other type of shogeg is when he thinks he's eating shuman. He knows it's asur to eat chaylev, but he thinks he's eating shuman. In both of those cases, we had established previously that a king brings a special he-goat, a special king korban. But a Kohen Gadol only brings a special a special bull korban as a Kohen Gadol, only in the case where he thinks that it's permitted to eat chaylev. But in a case where he knows that it's asur to eat chaylev, but he thinks he's eating shuman, he brings a regular korban chatas, he does not bring a bull. So therefore, the scope of a king's special korban is wider than the scope for a Kohen Gadol. And if that's the case, I would have made the following kal v'chomer. If a king whose special korban applies to more cases, and yet still doesn't bring it if he sinned after he was dethroned, then surely a Kohen Gadol whose scope is narrower for his special korban, surely after he's demoted should never have to bring a special Kohen Gadol korban. And that's why you need the pasuk to tell you that no, despite the fact that the scope of his korban is narrower than a king's, he still always brings a Kohen Gadol special korban, even if he sinned after he was demoted. So now the Gemara says, well, then let's use the kal v'chomer in the opposite direction. V'nesi nami nasi mi kal v'chomer. Uma mashiach she'ein mevi b'shigigas ma'isa mevi chatas misha avar nasi she'mevi chatas b'shigigas ma'isa eino din she'mevi chatas misha avar. Let's apply the kal v'chomer the opposite direction. Once we've established that a Kohen Gadol always has to bring his special korban, even when he sinned after he was demoted, then let's say, well, then kal v'chomer, a king, would have to bring his special korban after he's dethroned, because his scope of the special he-goat is wider than the Kohen Gadol's. So therefore, Talmud lomar asher nasi echata kishuhu nasi in kishuhu hejot lo. And therefore we have a special verbiage by the king. It says only when he's a king does he bring the korban, meaning only when he sinned as a king does he have to bring his special korban, not when he sinned after he was dethroned. So the bottom line is that we don't have a rhyme or reason based on logic as to why when a Kohen Gadol sins after he's demoted, he has to bring a special par, and why a king, if he sins after he's dethroned, brings a commoner's korban. It's based on the psukim. The Gemara basically concludes, despite the logic that could be made in any direction, you look at the Gzeras HaKasav, and that's what the Torah tells you. We'll hold it here for today, and I appreciate if you got something out of the DAF.